Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today for part 2 of Gig Worker Voice, Empowering Gig Workers, Worker-Led, Worker-Run Guerrilla Tactics. We're really excited about the panel of organizers and workers we have today, and we're gonna have a great discussion. Before we get started, I just wanna offer a couple housekeeping things. We are doing some live interpretation. This is a Spanish and English event. Um, and we do apologize, but we're not going to be able to provide a Spanish dub for all of our audience members, but we will be translating some of the things that our panelists say back into English. So if folks could just give us a little patience as we work that out, that would be great. Also, just a reminder to our panelists to try and not speak as fast as you can so that we can give a little grace to our interpreters who are helping us out today. So in case you missed it, last week at this time in part 1, we brought together a panel of gig workers across industries who talked a lot about what it means to be a gig worker and the unique challenges that gig workers face. We talked a lot about the unpaid labor that goes into being a gig worker, the capital that's required to get started being a gig worker, the way that companies and algorithms can manipulate your pay without your input, and the frustration that generates. We also talked a lot about a false binary that kind of exists between gig work being seen as something that involves a lot of freedom and flexibility, but not the stability to have access to benefits that we believe that all workers should enjoy. And ultimately, that led us to the point where we believe in the importance of workers speaking out about these conditions, building connections together, and building worker power. So I'll hand it over to Vanessa, my co-host, to talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today.
Hey folks, my name is Vanessa. I'm an organizer with Gig Workers Collective. So today we're going to be talking more about what does it mean to be an organizer, especially because none of the panelists that are represented on this panel are folks that have a traditional professional labor organizing background. And then we're going to be discussing what it means to build power in the absence of being able to unionize often. How do we do that? How do we build worker power without traditional structures and traditional labor protections that are afforded to many traditional employees, right? So how do we forge our own path, and how do we build worker power in the absence of any sort of formal protections that can be afforded to workers that are organizing in their workplace? So I wanted to introduce everybody to our panelists. We have Willie Solis from Gig Workers Collective. We have Adrian Williams, who's an Amazon organizer. Kat Hollis from Haymarket Pole Collective. We have Honan Mancia from Los Deliveristas Unidos. And we have Jeanette Berry from the Music Workers Alliance. So without further ado, we're gonna hop straight into the intro questions. What I'm gonna do is I'll ask a question, and then I'll call upon the first person. Everybody else can kind of pass it along to the next person. So the first question is to tell us a little bit about what work you do and what drove you to start organizing. And was there a catalyst for how you got involved in organizing? And I am going to start this question off with Willie, and he can pass it along to the next panelist.
Oh, hi, I'm Willie, and I got involved in organizing gig workers in 2019, 2020, when we did have a catalyst, and the catalyst was the pay change for Shipt. I've been working on the Shipt platform since 2019, and we had a very transparent pay model that allowed us the opportunity to know what we were going to get paid before we weren't taking the orders, and then now after that change, we weren't able to see that anymore, and so that angered a lot of folks, including myself, and I started organizing around that. And from there, I'll popcorn it to Adrian.
Hi. Yeah, for me, the catalyst was kind of COVID and watching how, you know, as an Amazon driver, because we are technically not Amazon workers, which a lot of people don't realize, we work for third-party delivery service providers. And when the school shut down, you know, Amazon was real quick to be like, oh, hey, whoa, you don't work for us. And you know, it was really hard because you apply for unemployment and it took 5 months for me to get my unemployment, and I had to homeschool my daughter and trying to figure out how you're going to eat and pay your rent. And Amazon was saying, oh, well, here, we have this money that we'll give our workers, but oh, not you, even though I wear an Amazon branded uniform, drive an Amazon branded van, drive in and pick up Amazon packages and deliver them to customers who think you work for Amazon. And it really pissed me off to know that I'm doing all these things on behalf of a company and delivering these fake ass smiles, and yet I can't pay my rent or feed my kid. And so that's really what was the catalyst for me to start organizing, because it was all BS and there was no money. And I'll pass it to Jeanette.
Thank you, Adrian. So I began organizing kind of independently of Music Workers Alliance when I looked at a sheet of all of the musicians that were working at a club, and there were no Black women on the bill as leaders of the as leaders in a band. And I spoke out to a group of my peers, and many were concerned. Many just said it was status quo. So I knew I had to find people that understood what it meant to work for more than just the status quo. And that's where I came upon MWA and really understood what it meant to be a music worker, not just a musician, but understand that we do have power. And together, collectively, we can change that, because it's not easy, especially in a city like New York, to be an independent musician when people don't understand that their $50 ticket is probably only paying the musician $50 a night. So it's very important to me for there to be transparency, not only for the musicians themselves, but also for the audiences. And that's why I began. And I will popcorn it to Kat.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Kat Hollis. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, and I founded the Haymarket Pole Collective, which is a group of sex workers who is working towards equitable and safe work and home spaces for sex workers of color here in Oregon. We do a lot of work right now surrounding COVID and a little bit of labor advocacy, but almost all of our power was put towards getting COVID testing out to workers who are still working even throughout the pandemic. Even when restaurants were closed down, there were still strippers on top of laps in Portland. And so we've been doing a lot to try to remit the harm from COVID and help people know their rights. And it started after Blackout Tuesday, when strip clubs in town were posting Black Lives Matter signs when there had never been a black butt on their stage ever. And so just seeing the difference between representation versus performative advocacy, and trying to make people actually stand up for what they said that they were standing up for. So we've been fighting ever since. And I'll pop it to Jonan.
Jonan, es su turno.
Estamos en ¿qué es el organizador para nosotros?
Preséntese.
Para nosotros es...
Preséntate, Jonan. Preséntate.
Perdón, mi nombre es Jonan Mancilla. Para nosotros es pues es poder construir entre los trabajadores
to build in
y brindar apoyo a nuestros compañeros de trabajo para que juntos alcemos, perdón,
Siga hablando.
para que juntos hacemos nuestras voces y cambiemos las condiciones laborales
So that
en
we
los
can
lugares de
change
trabajo que pues no habíamos tenido la oportunidad de hacerlos, y eso es algo que nunca pensamos que iba a suceder, y esto inició hace no mucho.
Okay.
Irina, is it possible that you could provide the translation after Honana's finished speaking?
If the sentences are not like 3 paragraphs, yes. So maybe I can that to Jonan.
That would be great. Thank you.
Jonan, para facilitar la interpretación, usted podría decir unas frases, así yo las puedo interpretar y después, entonces usted habla, yo hablo, después usted vuelve a hablar para que podamos hacer esto. Jonan?
Sí, perfecto.
Perfecto, perfect.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So we wanted to start on a positive note. We were hoping that everyone could think about demonstrations of worker power that you've seen either in your own work or someone else's. We often, workers, especially in the gig economy, are often told that their collective action couldn't possibly make a difference, that the people that we're up against are too strong. And I think we're all here because we know that not to be true. And so it'd be great if folks could share some of the moments of victory that you've experienced, just to kind of start us off. And I'll give it to the group for whoever wants to jump in.
I'd love to start. As a new member of Music Workers Alliance, I've had the opportunity to speak with some that have been there longer, but one of the things that I wanted to just give at first was the fact that we have had the ability and the capacity and the success to get musicians together to fight for something in the first place. I don't know if people outside of organizing understand how hard that is. And coming into this very new, it was something that I didn't think about because I was so passionate. So I just thought everybody was this passionate. That is not the case. So to have an organization that is, on the ground, organized, and ready to recruit people that want to get the work done is a huge success. And we also have little caucuses of groups of music workers, which if you're not a musician, you may not understand how much musicians and other music workers do not talk or interact. And that's just kind of the status quo again of the ecosystem. But sound engineers don't always like to talk to musicians. Musicians don't always like to talk to venue managers or whatever. But here in Music Workers Alliance, we have the capacity, they've actually done it. We've actually done it to be able to have DJs, sound engineers, instrumentalists from all over the country because of COVID. We were really centered in New York City at first, but because of COVID, we have folks from all over the country who are saying, yes, we want to organize like you're doing in New York City where we are. And that's hugely success. That's a huge success that I never, could have imagined being outside of that. So I just wanted to start with that.
We had a lot of success because a lot of the workspaces, the official workspaces that we are working with are small businesses actually in Portland, because they are just a bunch of strip clubs. We have the most strip clubs per capita here. And so we have about 54 strip clubs just in Portland proper, not including outside of Portland. And when things started, a lot of the workers were asking us, well, what can I do? I'm not in charge of booking. I'm not in charge of pay. I'm not in charge of how these businesses run. But I think, we were speaking to it when we were talking about the Amazon thing, that we are representatives of this business. If they want smiles on faces, if they want people out in the streets doing this work, guess who has the means of production? It is us. And I was really impressed that a lot of the dancers who are more prolific and are used for advertising for these clubs, they're used to bring people into these clubs, stepped forward and said, you know what, my face is on the poster and this business has to change. And it's really hard when you are an integral part of a business for them to say no. So I was just so proud of the people who went directly to their supervisors and said, I don't understand why this is such a big issue. If it's such a big issue, we can go work someplace else. And that's not an option in a lot of places because there's not many strip clubs to go work at. You can't just go to a different club in Minneapolis. There's only 3 of them. But because Portland has that really unique culture, I was really amazed at how workers stepped forward to say, I do want to keep working here. This is the workspace I choose. And I want it to be better. So I was really impressed at some of the more, I mean, not even direct action, but just direct communication to their bosses to say, you know what, we have a good working relationship when it's possible. How do we maintain that? And I was just really proud of the dancers who stepped forward and did that work without any support. It was really impressive.
I'd like to build on that. And we have had some really good successes, but I think the biggest success that we've had is the fact that we're seeing a large amount of workers starting to rise up. The simple fact that we can do and have this type of convening really shows the power of gig workers coming together in general, and basically us transcending not only our particular platforms, but also industry. And understanding that our struggle is the same throughout various industries, and understanding that we hold that power to bring accountability towards these larger corporations, some of them multi-billion-dollar corporations, some of them small businesses. But at the end of the day, we as workers hold that power, and by working together, talking together, and formulating a strategy together, we're able to overcome the disparity that we have against our employers. For us in general, for gig workers, we are misclassified and we don't have the standard protections of an employee. So that's another thing that we have to contend with. And the bravery that's needed in order to overcome that has been very inspirational to me. Some of the work that we do involves other organizations like Human Rights Watch, and I'm currently on assignment with them here in Houston, Texas, and that's what we're doing, meeting workers from across the state of Texas. And one of the interesting things that I keep finding is that it's a very common story, the one that they share, and there's so much commonality that it just basically drives us and glues us together. So I think that's probably the biggest victory that I'd like to point out, is the fact that we hold that power. It's in us, and we need to continue to build on it.
Thank you so much, everyone. I definitely do want to give Hanan a chance to speak, because I know that the Deliveristas have been very active lately and have some major victories under their belt. So I was wondering, Hanan, could you tell us a little bit about what the Deliveristas have been up to and some of your recent victories?
Sí, hola, mi nombre es Jonan, soy uno de los miembros de los Deliveristas Unidos.
Irina, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, now I'm afraid that I apologize. Mi nombre es Nan. My name is Jonan. I'm one of the members of the, I don't remember. Jonan, un miembro
de los Deliveristas Unidos.
United Delivery People.
Me gustaría hablar de una de las grandes demostraciones que hemos realizado, fue la marcha del 21 de abril.
One of the biggest demonstrations we have had was the march of April 21st. Would like to talk about that.
Donde nuestro poder se demostró con más de 2,000 repartidores en las calles de Nueva York, haciendo ruido.
Where our power was shown with more 2,000 delivery workers in the streets of New York.
Y gracias a todo este esfuerzo, hemos introducido estas 6 legislaciones que
Thanks to
esperemos
the
que
effort,
pasen.
we have new legislation.
Y me gustaría compartírselas, que son 6 legislaciones que metimos.
I would like to share with you their 6.
Y el número 1 es el tener salario mínimo y digno. Número 2.
Minimum dignified wage.
Distancias limitadas cuando entregamos órdenes.
Number 2 is limited distance we deliver orders.
Accesos a los baños, que esa es una realidad.
Access to rooms with the reality.
Que las aplicaciones nos brinden el equipo necesario para hacer las entregas, como las bolsas térmicas, que muchos no las piden.
That they have materials that we need to get the deliveries, the thermal tools.
Que nos paguen a tiempo y sin cobro extra, porque algunas compañías nos cobran por mandarnos el cheque o depositarnos a la cuenta de banco.
Be on time and get extra charges. For example, some companies charge to deposit our money.
Y el 6, el último, que exista transparencia en cuanto al pago de las propinas.
De las propinas.
De las propinas.
Okay. And the last one is transparency for the tip payments.
Absolutely.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Glendy. I would like to do a little bit resume of what the Honan, is saying. So I know I was a little bit, confused because we have a problem with the audio. But just I wanna I am an organizer too with Los Deliveristas Unidos and in with Worker Justice Project. So Honan was talking about how he started organizing. Honan was one of the first leaders that started this movement. Actually, Honan, he didn't have idea about organize. He started before the pandemic. I'm sorry, and he started with a group of people. Can you turn off this one, please? I'm sorry. ¿Me puedes decir que apagues el teléfono? So Honan started with a small group of delivery workers, his co-workers. So nobody else was doing this job in this moment. So and they started building, little by little. So and he started with a group of people like 10, all his family who was doing delivery workers. So then after when the pandemic started, so the problems increased and increased, and the apps, because it was a big market, right? Everybody was doing deliveries, and everybody was using the apps, especially in New York City. So the apps were famous. Everybody wants to order through the app because nobody want to get infected with COVID. And New York City was stopped. Nobody was working in this moment in New York City. So what happened? Just delivery worker was working in New York City. So delivery workers, they start being harassed, not just for the police, for the customers, from everybody was harassing them because nobody was in the field. So what happened was the apps start they call the deliveristas as independent contract. That means they don't have any rights. So however, the companies treat them as employees. But when they want when they have an accident or when they have an issue with accounts get disconnect, the app is not there. So they say, I'm sorry, but I cannot do anything because you are independent contract. So, and this is when they saw that they need to get organized. And this is when they start we had to do something. And when I met Honan, they already have a group of people 100 that Honan also, he already have to organize, and we start building the power there.
I'm gonna go ahead and just transition Glendy really quickly.
I'm sorry. So thank you so much. So and just I want to share that. So I would pass to, I don't know, maybe Willie, you spoke already, right? So I don't know, maybe.
It was actually a really brilliant transition, because the next question that I was going to pose to the panelists is, how do you go from being a worker to being an organizer, and what's the difference, and how do you make that shift? And I want to start this question off with Adrienne. I know she didn't get a chance to answer in the last round of questions. So Adrienne, if you want to pick up here, again, just the question is, how do you go from being a worker to an organizer? What's the difference, and how do you make that shift?
Yeah, for me, it was a tricky thing, partially because Amazon tries to shut you down. I didn't last very long in that. I think I went back to work in June and I ended up quitting in July. So I didn't do a very good job at that. But part of that was because they were actively hiding COVID cases. And, I have an 8-year-old, and my mom was 64, and she was watching my daughter 3 to 4 days a week for me. And so I had to really weigh the risks. At the time, there wasn't a vaccine, and they had eyes on me all the time. And I was trying to figure, like, could I still organize even if I didn't work there? In the moment that I was organizing, I was doing things like trying to stash my phone in places while I was driving into the warehouse to prove that they weren't distancing people, they weren't giving us PPE, they weren't doing all the things that they were doing all their stupid commercials for to prove that they were taking care of us. I knew they weren't doing that. Everybody that worked there knew they weren't doing that. But how do you fight this multi-billion-dollar machine as this like low-wage worker in Richmond, California? So the only tools I had was like my cell phone and my loud mouth. And so I was trying to, just like shove my phone in there and then talk shit to whoever I could. And they were aware of me, and they were coming down hard, and they were doing things like threatening my DSP owner by like saying things like, hey, your contract is up pretty soon. And I was really worried that I was going to cost this man his small business. It's really nerve-wracking thinking that, the livelihood of not just yourself, but everybody else's paycheck could be on the line, because all you're trying to do is make sure that, people don't die. People don't lose their babies if they're pregnant. People don't catch a deadly virus, and people's wages aren't stolen, which to me seems like common sense. But, the company is so worried about mere pennies that they're okay with you dying. So trying to transition from being a worker to an organizer, I was so naive, thinking like, oh, I'll just tell them these things are happening, and then they'll just say, you know what, Adrienne, thank you for bringing this to our attention, and we're going to make a change. No, they don't give a shit. And so I was very naive, and I didn't realize the kind of fury that was going to come down on me. And it really took me by surprise, and I didn't last too long as a worker. And I found another gig, and I realized I think it's better just to be an organizer. And so maybe I'm not even the best person to ask that question, because I didn't stay being a worker too long. It's not easy to do both.
That's for sure.
Do you want me to pass it?
Sure, if anyone else just wants to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Just like Adrienne just said, it's not easy to do both. I've been doing both since I started organizing in early February of 2020. But it started with a very small group of us. It was just 3 of us, and the other two have not made it this far, and that's because this just requires so much of you as a person. It requires you to wear multiple hats and basically sacrifice quite a bit of yourself into this passion, this newfound passion of yours that it requires all your attention. It requires sacrifice from a financial standpoint for your family. And more importantly for yourself, it requires you to grow. I don't have any labor organizing experience, and I think all of us here on this panel don't. So at the end of the day, it's like, how do you become something that you're not? And I really wasn't born for this. I'm an introvert, and it's very difficult for me to hold even a simple conversation with someone. But over the last year, I've grown tremendously and had numerous amount of conversations with workers from across the country. And in those conversations, I mean, they just touch you to the core. And that is a passion that drives me forward. And whenever I want to quit or think about quitting, I hear a new story, or someone else reaches out and says, thank you for what you've done, or, hey, what you guys are doing is really changing and affecting our lives. So every single time that you think about quitting or giving up and you hear something like that, it's very difficult to stop. And so the transition has not been easy, for sure, but I think it's one that's necessary, and it requires a certain amount of people to take that leap of faith and hope that they're doing the right thing, to empower other workers to rise up and basically hold these companies accountable. Without us, they'll continue to exploit and continue to do the things that they're doing. So I really hope that at the end of the day, the one message that gets across from this panel is the simple fact that we need to.
Thank you so much, Willie. That's really inspiring.
¿Puedo hablar?
Absolutely.
Bueno, yo sigo siendo trabajador, como decía mi compañera Glendy. Yo no me di cuenta en qué momento me volví organizador. ¿Alguien me está traduciendo?
Oh,
I can do. So he said that he still is a worker, so he still doesn't know the transition, how to be organizer, but because he started organizing without know how to organize.
Yo sé que ustedes me ven muy serios aquí en el Zoom, pero en la calle soy más divertido, y eso me ayudó a volverme organizador sin darme cuenta. Con mis compañeros aquí arriba fue empezando un hola, ¿cómo estás? Y de repente, como dice Glendy, ya tenía un grupo de WhatsApp con más de 100 personas y ellas fueron las que me dijeron que yo era bueno haciendo esto, y ahora me dedico a trabajar y a organizar. Y hasta el momento, gracias a lo que he aprendido de ellas, es que lo sigo haciendo.
So he said that you can see him very serious here, but when he's working, he's so friendly, and he started like telling the workers, his co-workers, how are you feeling today? Did you get enough orders? So, and this is how he started. People start trusting him, and they start just creating a WhatsApp group, and like in terms of months, like 3-4 months, they got 100 people in the WhatsApp group. And after they decide to create a page, a Facebook page, and this is how he started building that group of people. But he said that he doesn't know how manage all that, how organize all these many people, and he contact us, and this is how he started.
Wow, that's so inspiring to hear. And you know, I want to build on that, and with another question, and see, you know, where I'm curious if folks can get out where their confidence to start organizing came from. And what do you say to people who are other workers who tell you that their actions can't hold power, or that they as workers don't hold power? How do we convince them that they do have power and that they should join you in taking action?
I would love to answer that. I would tell people that, you know, as one person against billionaires, you absolutely don't have power. but there are more of us than there are of them. And so that's where your power lies. And for me, I don't think I ever felt like I had power, but my confidence, I don't think it was confidence, it was just anger. I think my power came from being an angry Black woman, honestly, because I was just pissed the F off. I was mad that you told me I had to take off and homeschool my child in a dual immersion Spanish, English class, and I don't speak Spanish, and I got to do it anyway with zero money and somehow survive. I was mad that powerful men in powerful places that I couldn't find created this virus, and now everybody's sick and everybody's scared and everybody's broke. I was mad that you're creating this gig economy where we're all freaking slaves. I'm mad that there's really slaves in China right now and nobody gives a shit. I'm mad at so many things that we don't have anything to do with. And I'm mad that we even have to have this panel right now. And I think if more people can be mad, we'll realize that we have more in common than we don't. I'm mad that we had Trump for 4 years. I'm mad that we're divided over race when none of it's about race. It's all about money. And if we can all realize that, we can get together, be mad together, and stop this bullshit. I think that's where the power lies, is if we all collectively get mad together. So that's what I say.
That definitely resonates with me. My organizing started in a flame war in a comment section on Instagram where they had posted these Black Lives Matter signs, and people were like, why are you posting those signs? That ain't you. And I just remember being like, yeah, well, you guys could hire a few more brown butts. And people literally responded to me and told me there are no Black strippers in Portland. And I was like, who are you talking to then? Do I not exist? And it made me realize that there is this huge sector of my community that really doesn't believe that we're even here. And I think that reflects onto people's experience because they've been seen as invisible. And so they haven't felt like they had power. And when that anger came up for me, all I could think of was, I don't know what I want, but it's not this. Anything other than this, because we're done coming to this end of the conversation. We're done coming to the place where people are fearing for their children, fearing for their grandparents about whether or not they're going to feed them or whether or not they're going to get them sick, because those were the two options. And I just knew that there had to be something else. And if there was anybody who wanted to go with me, my mantra was Mr. Rogers said that in times of crisis, you can always look for the helpers and you will always find someone who is helping. So when there was naysayers, when there was people threatening to break my legs, when there was people threatening my life, all I would do was turn around and look for the people who were helping, because there were always people who were down for the cause, who were down for Black liberation, who were down for worker liberation, who were down for trans and Indigenous liberation. And when you start focusing that passion, that anger that you feel in a productive way with people who are helping, it is amazing how quickly that gathers steam, because there are so many more of us than there are them. So that resonates with me a lot when you said you were angry, because I was livid, and definitely the angry Black lady. That's definitely where it started.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. I was mad and I couldn't take it anymore. Just like Adrian and Kat, I couldn't understand why my peers didn't get it. Especially when in New York City, a bulk of the musicians that I'm friends with are playing Black American music, better known as jazz. And there was such a lack of Black women on these stages. And I knew that there had to be people that were working for not just Black women, but for the least of us, because all of us are working for the least of us. And that's all that we are ever doing, because the most of us are the ones that are going up in space. But the least of us, the ones that are so important to this entire ecosystem, have always been the ones that have been given the short end of the stick. And as musicians, I understood that if I could simply talk to people and get their grievances and understand where they're coming from, and let them know that if the two of us do this together and have conversations and fight, we can probably fix things. We can change things, and 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 12. And that's when it snowballs and we can get things done. It's not easy and it's not overnight. And I think a lot of people think that once we complain once, it'll be fixed. And that can't be the case. So joining Music Workers Alliance, I realized that this group of organizers was like, hey, this is how we'll do this. And because there were strategic things in place, I'm getting an education, because it's like, all right, we can do legislation, we can be out in the streets, wherever you feel comfortable. And that's what made me most confident, is because it was wherever I felt comfortable. I knew that I had a place. And that's what I'd say to any other musician, whatever your skill is, you know, not just playing music, but if you're a people person, if you write really good emails, if you can wrangle people up, if you can drive, if you can do taxes, you have a place in organizing. And that's really important to understand, that each one of us is good enough to do this work and can get this work done.
Just to build on that a little bit, I love thinking of the, you know, why pyramid schemes don't work, because it only takes 13 levels to get to every single person on this planet. So if you get 3 people and they get 3 people, it only takes a couple of layers for us to have this huge following. And so if you think about it like that, like, let's run out of people that we've contacted. If everybody just got 3 people into this, we could make a huge change. That's all I gotta say.
And I wanted to open it up just to Willie, I think, hasn't answered yet, and Honan hasn't answered yet. If you guys want to throw in just a little bit of how you found your confidence, or what agitated you. Like, it sounds like, you know, in a lot of these responses, like, agitation was what gave people the confidence to move forward. So I would love to hear from y'all, if you guys have any contributions about, like, sort of like, you know, like, how did you get here? Right? Like, how did you get to a point where you felt like empowered, or maybe it was a fuck it, I have nothing to lose kind of situation, right? If y'all have any thoughts, go ahead and jump in.
It was definitely, I ain't got nothing to lose situation. It was a situation where, having a conversation with my family, I just you knew that somebody had to speak up and say something. And at the time, Shift was very, very powerful in silencing and censoring workers. That was one of the biggest things that really pissed me off about them, was the fact that they tried to silence me when I was asking very serious questions. And I thought, what I considered legitimate questions about my workplace and how I was earning and all that. But one of the things that I heard here recently from a worker, and that's really what drives me, is the workers, to be honest with you. Like, the other people that I speak to is I listen to what they have to say, and hearing their stories and understanding what it is that their struggles are. They're very similar to mine. And one of these workers said, you know, the biggest waves come from underneath the ocean surface. And that really resonated with me, because at the end of the day, it's where they don't see us coming from that really makes us so powerful. They didn't know that we were organizing ship shoppers, and they didn't know that we were coming. They tried to silence us before we even began. But when they recognized and realized, just like Juan was saying, you know, there was hundreds of us, and we weren't stopping, and there was nothing that they could do to stop us. At that point in time, that's when we felt that we were able to make some gains, that we were unstoppable at that point. Or have we changed everything that we want? Do we have everything that we need? Absolutely not. There's still so much work to do. But at the end of the day, the work is being done, and it's being done and driven by workers, and it continues to be driven by workers. And we're getting more and more powerful. We're reaching out to attorney general's offices. We're having conversations with Human Rights Watch. We're having conversations with so many different states and so many different capacities and so many different people that at the end of the day, they cannot stop us anymore. And I think that that's what really should resonate with everybody in the audience.
And Honan, if you had anything else that you wanted to throw in there, we'd be happy to hear from you too.
Sí, nosotros Bueno, estaba escuchando que estaban hablando sobre cómo es que empezamos a organizar y que si no teníamos miedo de hacerlo. Y eso es algo que eh, todavía no, muchos compañeros no entienden, ese miedo de perder el trabajo, de perder la aplicación, porque nosotros trabajamos con la aplicación. Y
Déjame traducir, Jonan.
perdón.
So he said how he started that many of his workers still they are afraid, so they don't want to organize because they don't want to get their account deactivate because they think if they start doing that their accounts are going deactivate and they don't want to, they get afraid and sometimes they don't want to talk. So continúa.
Y entonces esa era una bomba de tiempo porque este abuso ya existía antes de la pandemia. Estamos hablando del robo de propinas, de no tener acceso a los baños, de las distancias largas, entrega, largas amenazas de desactivación. Los asaltos ya existían, pero se fueron hacia arriba y hablando entre nosotros, pues nos dimos cuenta pues, que teníamos que hacer algo.
Déjame traducir. So he said that, he was feeling abused, that a lot of issues they already exist, but with the pandemic everything increased. For example, the access to bathrooms, that when they go to the restaurant they don't, if they ask for the bathroom they send, basically you cannot go to the restaurant. And even though these people is like picking up orders from the restaurant. So, and he said the other thing that impulsed him was that the apps constantly was sending message like threatening message that if you do that your account is going to get deactivated. So all the a lot of assaults in the street. Also, few of his co-workers passed away from assaults when they were doing this job. So he said they get tired and they said we had to do something. If we don't do, nobody will do for us. Continúa, Jona.
Y seguimos hablando con los compañeros de que no tengan miedo, y creo que me considero un ejemplo para ellos aquí en mi área, porque muchos quizá no lo hagan, pero ellos sienten que yo soy un buen representante y eso me hace sentir bien para seguir haciendo esto.
So he said that he thinks he represents them, and he feels that he had to continue doing that, and he is trying to do the best he can because he feels all his coworkers trust him, and he wants. This is how he feels, and for this reason he want to continue organizing.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sonan. So I wanted to move on to our next question, which is, how are you and your organization or your organizing base working to center marginalized groups in your organizing? And what tactics and strategies have you found that make an impact? And I want to kick this question off to Kat because she very graciously suggested that we ask. And I actually think this is such a critical question, right? Because if you're organized for centering the most marginalized folks, you're invariably going to benefit everybody, but not true vice versa. So I would love, Kat, if you want to kick this off, and then anyone else who's interested in answering, feel free to jump in as well.
One of the ways that we center marginalized people is that we give out a lot of aid. Part of the issue that we were seeing is that people didn't have the space to get into activism. They were hungry, they were worried about their job, they were worried about their kids, they were worried about COVID. And so one of the ways that we really tried to address that was to first make sure that we were providing an ecosystem for these people to thrive in, so that they felt comfortable coming to us, so that when you're worried about risking your job, you know that somebody has your back. Like Conan was saying, building trust is so important. And so providing people with COVID testing, I think, was number one. Giving out grocery gift cards. Whenever we get funding in, we make sure that a lot of it goes to grocery gift cards for workers, so that people can feel confident about just where their next meal is coming from. Because it's hard. I mean, we're at a really base level where you're really trying to get people like fed before a meeting, because nobody can think straight if they don't have food in their belly. So really providing some of those really basic needs. We also have a weighted system for any voting that we do. So those who have disabilities, those who are Black, Indigenous, Asian Pacific Islander, those who are trans, those who have children are put on a greater weight when it comes to our voting system so that their voices come to the top, so that we make sure that our decisions are made in the best interest of those people defining their own best outcomes. So that's one of the ways that we do that.
That's incredible. I love that idea. I might have to steal it. Anybody else who wants to jump in and answer this question? We would love to hear more about how you're centering marginalized people, and how that looks in your organizing.
I would love to kind of tackle that a little bit. So Amazon already targets marginalized people in general. That's who they hire off top. Because if they hire marginalized people, then when they use and abuse them and toss them away, there's really no way for us to fight back. They do illegal things all the time to their workers, and they know it's illegal, and their attitude is kind of like, yeah, it's illegal, but you're small and I'm big, so go get a lawyer and sue me, poor person. And so unfortunately right now I'm kind of like a one-woman show. I'm a little hesitant to join any organizations because I've had a lot of bad experiences with Amazon organizations. There've been a lot of male-led organizations that don't really care about the angle that I'm going up against. And so I've kind of said, screw it, I'm good off organizations. I work with Vanessa and her group because they're good people. And I've worked with some groups with People Strike because they have been good people. And then I just kind of float around other groups that are good people. What I have been focusing on is the pregnancy discrimination. And what we found, and the story has been the same every single time, is that a woman gets pregnant at Amazon. Their doctor eventually says, you are too pregnant to be lifting anything over about 10 pounds. At Amazon, you're lifting 50, 60, 70, up to 100 pounds. And the doctor says, we're going to put you on modified duty. Now, this is something your job has to honor. Amazon just ignores that paperwork. So we're finding a string of miscarriages coast to coast. We've even found some in Canada because Amazon ignores that paperwork. And once they are forced to honor that modification, they go into the process of trying to fire that woman. Because everything is automated, the little scanners on those workers' hip in the warehouse is a little tracker and everything else. They're on a number system, 0 to 24. If you get up to 24 points, you are automatically fired, which means you could be fired without even seeing a human being. You get to 24, boom, you're fired. You don't even see a person. So I've talked to workers who say they get docked 9 points for job abandonment while they are literally working at work. So you're talking about a woman who's already 7.5, 8 months pregnant, exhausted, has worked 10 hours, and now instead of being able to go home and get off her pregnant feet, now has to search around a big ass warehouse to find an HR person who may or may not be there to try and get those 9 points off of her record because she's been docked for job abandonment, because the goal is to exhaust her because they don't want her there because she's been given modifications by her doctor. I've heard stories of Amazon going so far as calling people's OBGYNs and saying, we need you to reverse these modifications. And the OBGYNs being like, get off my line. You're not supposed to call me because of HIPAA laws. But again, you're small, I'm big, sue me. They don't care about laws. So my new strategy, what I'm trying to do is reach out to Kaiser and county and all these doctors and see if I can get these OBGYNs on board to start talking to their patients. And if they know their patients work for Amazon, start saying, hey, we're aware that there is and I want to put this up here. It's in, I think I put it on your direct chat, Vanessa, but I put it in the chat for everyone. There has been a EEOC investigation, and now there is we're looking for plaintiffs. There's one woman that is being represented. We're trying to find more to have a class action for this, because we know that this is happening to workers across the board, where women are being fired, women are losing their babies, and Amazon doesn't give a crap. So that's the thing I'm working on now, and I can't think of a better thing to try to do, but I know we're racing against the clock because it's such a small minority of people, even within the warehouses, and you only have 3 to 4 months before they're not even pregnant anymore. And many of the women that we've talked to will say, yeah, this is happening, but I need my job. Because the other thing Amazon does is they're going into especially these rural towns, and they're the only employer in town. And so I've talked to a lot of women that are like, yeah, it's happening, but I need my job. And so I'm not willing to say anything. I can't blame them, but I also don't know how to fight against that. We found a big cluster in Arizona where they sued, but they sued individually, signed NDAs. Now it doesn't see the light of day. These are human rights abuses, and it has to stop. So yeah, if you know anybody that this is happening to, if you've heard of anybody, just spread the word, because the goal is not just to have a class action, but to then shame their bigger customers, which is not us. Amazon doesn't give a crap if half their customers leave. They have 2 billion customers. They don't care if they lose us. Their customers that use their AWS software, which is their cloud technology, Netflix, Oracle, ADP, they just sued to be able to get a government contract for their AWS software. Those are their big money customers. We need to shame the shit out of them and make them stop using Amazon software, because that's where their dollars are. And if we can get this class action going and then say, hey, Amazon's killing babies in wombs, are you okay with that? And then shame those customers into calling Jeff Bezos on the carpet. We need to get those shadow companies that use that AWS software and start making them responsible for what Amazon does. And I'm hoping that we can get that class action to do just that and make them say, no, 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 you're responsible for this as well. So that's my goal. I don't know, I'm one person, but hopefully we can make that happen somehow.
That's awesome, Adrienne. I'm loving these tactics and everything that you've thought of. Very inspiring. I wanted to pivot just a little bit because, you know, as Adrienne has discussed and as other people have discussed, when you do decide to organize, you're up against a lot and you're taking a lot of risks. And, you know, we're not gonna sit here and tell you that there aren't any risks involved, because there are. But I wonder if you could share with our audience some of the things that you can do that's within your power to minimize that risk, especially if someone's just starting out. And I was thinking maybe in particular, maybe Willie, you could start on this one. When you're talking to ship shoppers, when you're talking to delivery workers, and people are hesitant to really get involved and take action, what are some ways that what are things that people can do to avoid being deactivated or kind of dip their toe in before they jump all the way into organizing?
Well, unfortunately, there's no secret formula for not getting deactivated. Unfortunately, I wish there was, but that was a fear that I had myself when I first started organizing and having conversations with my fellow organizers at the time, which is just 3 of us. We were all petrified that we were going to get deactivated. We had to try to work in backroom channels through Messenger, not be very public about what we were saying and how we were saying it and what our thought process was and how we could grow from where we were. And we were basically just 3 people that were upset about the pay and didn't know what to do. So the first things that we started doing was contacting other workers. In a 2-week period of time, I actually spoke to over 675 people in a very quick period of time. So those conversations were all offline. I didn't have them directly online where people could actually see what we were saying. So we were very secretive in that regard. But I think the biggest aha moment came when I finally gave in to the fact that somebody had to speak and be the front-facing voice of all of this. And that's when I decided, and after speaking to my family and getting their permission, of course, decided that, hey, I was going to take that risk. And if they deactivated me, so be it. It is what it is. But that wasn't going to stop us from moving forward. And so feeling empowered by the backing that I had from my fellow workers is what really led to me being able to have that strength to say, okay, enough is enough. Somebody has to say something. And once we actually spoke out, I think the louder we got, the more safe that we felt. And so that's kind of like the weird part about it is the more that you speak out and you do it with your fellow workers, the easier it becomes to not fear as much. So at this point, I don't fear being deactivated or being retaliated against. I know that they've tried. I know that I've seen them try. I've seen them talk to reporters. Reporters have reached out to me and told me, they actually gave us this information about you, trying to tarnish you, and so on and so forth. There's nothing that they can say or do to me that would tarnish me to the point where I'm not publicly comfortable. So at the end of the day, that's the whole secret for me, is just not giving them what they want is the power to do that, to silence me. There's nothing that they could do at this point to stop me from talking or to reaching out to fellow workers, because at this point in time, I've seen how ugly they can be and have been to the hundreds and thousands of people that I've actually talked to. And the stories that I hear, and I've shed tears on the phone whilst I'm having these conversations with workers, and like it's just so uplifting to know that you're able to echo their sentiments and their fears and their concerns to the general public. Speaking on their behalf, it's a tremendous amount of weight that's on your shoulders. I think some of the panelists have kind of alluded to that. And at the end of the day, it's a very tough burden to have on your shoulders, but it's one that I bear proudly, and I hope that I'm doing a good job, and I hope that at the end of the day, it does bring change. I know that it already has, and I hope that it continues to, but ultimately, I hope it brings a change that actually stops this type of exploitation, because it needs to. At the end of the day, we're the ones that are doing everything for these companies to become, so profitable and carry this amount of money forward. And at the end of the day, we're the ones that are bearing all the liabilities and the risks. So I hope that at some level, more workers start standing up and speaking out, and just really stand next to each other in a unified fashion to become even stronger than what we already are.
Thanks so much, Willie. Does anyone else want to jump in with any tips or
document as much as you can. Photos of any contracts that you have, photos of your workplace, photos of your clocking in, clocking out. Take screenshots. You can email yourself, which creates a record that's admissible in court. So if you're keeping a diary, just email it to yourself. Talk about who you talked to, what days you talked to them, how your shifts changed after you talked to your supervisors, that sort of thing. And documenting that in an email thread can really help you if it does go to court.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Anyone else?
I know for me, just because I have a kid, I was real deliberate with talking to the district about, like, I don't want you guys taking promotional pictures of my kid. I don't want you guys, just making sure that she was kept out of any type of photos or anything like that, because I've already had issues with like weirdos coming by my house taking pictures, and Amazon legal sending pictures to my old boss with more, like, wanting more information. So just in terms of people who have children who are doing that, make sure that you kind of let your schools know what you're doing and keep the schools in the loop. They can be real advocates for you too in keeping your children safe.
That's a great point. Thank you. Honan, were you trying to get in there? Do you want to add anything?
Sí, me gustaría, sí, como dice, estaba escuchando que decía Willis, que esto pues no puede ser un secreto y que alguien tiene que dar la cara, y siempre va a existir ese miedo, pero si seguimos con miedo nadie va a pelear por nosotros, entonces siempre va a tener alguien que sea valiente.
Déjame traducir. So, yes, I wanted to add something. Like Willie said, so yes, it is a fair there, but it's always going. We going to have fear all the time. But somebody had to speak out, and continúa, Jona.
Y si alguien tiene que ser el valiente, y y yo sé que gracias a Proyecto de Justicia Laboral, sé que también ellos me han apoyado mucho en el sentido de que no tengo que tener miedo y que pues, muchas gentes también te empiezan a seguir por lo mismo. Aparte de también, pues ahora me siento mejor porque somos más de 50,000 repartidores que yo sé que cuento con su apoyo también.
So, we had the support from Worker Justice Project, and also we know that we are more than 50,000 delivery workers in New York City, and I know that I count with them. ¿Quieres agregar algo más?
No, está bien.
Yeah, that's all.
Great.
Awesome. So I wanted to just ask sort of, we're going to move on to our question and answer session from the audience soon. But before doing that, I wanted to ask just one last question for anybody who's interested and willing to answer, which is just how do you organize outside of the context of a traditional labor union? How do we build power outside of the context of a traditional labor union, specifically because many of us are classified in such a way that we're prohibited federally from unionizing or from even organizing in our workplaces. So, contrary to sort of the Cinderella story of established labor coming in and swooping poor workers off of their feet, what does the reality of that actually look like? Like how are you building power outside of the formal channels for building worker power?
So I'll speak on that really briefly. What I've seen is that education is paramount, and grabbing the people that do have a passion, that are mad, that are angry, that want to do something, don't know where to start, and guiding them, having those conversations, educating them on what it means to be whatever gig worker that you are. As a musician, it's different from everybody else on the panel, but still very similar in the fact that we're dealing with small venues, larger venues where there might be places to play, but depending upon who you like or if they like you, you'll never get to play there, which also stifles your, not only your money, but your name. So educating folks that you've had conversations with, making sure that you are actually speaking up to your community about what's going on, like Honan did, having conversations with your coworkers, and then understanding, organizing around certain things has helped. What I've seen MWA do is like, all right, this is one campaign that we're going to focus on. And if we not necessarily center one person, but we center the work, a lot of people aren't necessarily seen. And then we can center and be out in the streets talking not only to the company, but to the people that support these companies. Because as a musician, if I can get my fans on my side and say, don't go there, that's not necessarily immediately against the venue. That's fans against the venue. So that's stifling their money. So if you tell the folks that love you as a musician that you shouldn't go there because this is what they're doing to us, and bring that power, really educate not only the workers, but their fans as musicians, that's really, really helpful. And that also builds power to see that the musicians do have power, and their fan base that they've built, they can harness and say, listen, if you support us, this is how you can support us. And that might be very unique to the music workers, but it's something, and Kat's shaking her head. So yeah, like, I think that's such a huge part of it, is not only educating the music worker, but then in your organizing, educating your fan base so that they understand that this is what's happening. And that's humongous.
I would like to jump in real quick and add that we need not be afraid of what we don't know. So at the end of the day, reach out to other groups and other organizations that you normally wouldn't associate yourself with, and listen to their struggles. Because just listening to all the panelists here today, my struggles are very similar to theirs, and maybe not exactly the same, but I mean, at the end of the day, there's such a parallel. And same thing with your coworkers. Work with your coworkers and listen to their conversations and what they're complaining about, their pressure points. You know, there's a reason why they feel and a need to say something about what it is that they're going through and the experience that they're having. So definitely don't be afraid to like reach out and say, I don't know how to do this. And at the end of the day, reach out to experts that do, and let them guide you, because they're out there. Trust me, I've been talking to many of them, and a lot of times when I reach out to them, it's like I feel like I put my foot in my mouth and don't think that I know what I'm talking about. But they are willing and able to guide me through the process of understanding where I'm at and in that particular situation or problem, simply because I decided to ask. And there's so many good organizations out there that are willing to help people that don't have experience with organizing or a particular way of understanding a problem that's associated with organizing. But at the end of the day, don't be afraid. Jump in head first. Be mad. Yes, be mad, but do something about it. Do something. Don't just sit there. One of the things that we did was actually started gathering data and looking at ways that we could arm ourselves with information to combat what it was that Shipped as an organization, as a company was using against us, and saying, no, these guys don't know what they're talking about. And they were trying to gaslight us in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, they had to admit the fact that they were stealing tips. Because what? Because we did something about it. We actually worked our butts off to figure out how they were stealing our tips, and we wouldn't get off that throttle, and we would not stop investigating them and figuring out how it was that they were taking advantage of us, because we needed to understand the problem. So at the end of the day, that's what I would say is definitely work really hard to establish what the problems are and work through those problems and outside of yourself, not just within the realm and the capabilities of where you're at.
Beautifully put. I just want to open the floor to any of the other panelists that haven't yet answered the questions before we move on to our Q&A section. If you guys want to jump in, please feel free to, and then we'll start with audience questions.
Can I just love on everybody for a second? Because I wanted to just go back to Willie's first point, and I know I put this in for the panelists, but for me to be such a new organizer and to see so many organizations and people that are out here doing the work, even if they think it's just for themselves, they're doing the work for all of us, is so important. And for whoever is watching, please find like-minded people, like Willie said, outside of your field to also engage with. That's huge. And this has been such an amazing space to be a part of. So thank you, everybody. And I just wanted to love on y'all for a hot second because of it.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. You know, and on that note, I would want to remind folks that, you know, we put this really awesome panel together to be a resource to the audience, to people who are in the gig economy, thinking about taking action. And after this event, later this evening, we'll send out an email with links and ways you can connect with our panelists, because we do want them to be resources for you. And you know, I know Gig Workers Collective would love to hear from anyone who's thinking about organizing. Same here at Coworker, and I could probably speak for the rest of my panelists as well. But yeah, so let's move in. We have a couple exciting questions from the audience. One sort of specific, but it's pretty interesting to me, and maybe Willie, you can help us clarify this. Someone asked, do other workers experience the cult culture that exists with Shipped? That's been a huge obstacle for organizing. Willie, could you explain like what that cult culture is and where maybe it might exist with other companies?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really rather unique for Shipped in so many different ways. With Shipped, one of the main things was that you could never say anything bad about Shipped. Shipped is really good at promoting itself as a feel-good company, and that everything is always rainbows, sunshine and rainbows. That's pretty much the general thing. Unicorns and rainbows. That's what they try to push forth. And like at the end of the day, far from the truth. That the reality is that there's so many bad things about it, and there are some good things. I'm not going to sit here and say everything is bad, because there are some good things, but not to the point where we need to negate everything that's bad and just swallow it. And so at the end of the day, they created a culture that allowed them the ability to feel insulated from any kind of organizing or any kind of backlash. And I think that that's where they made a mistake, is that they didn't think that people would rise up and not be afraid of them, because they had developed a basically protection or force field around themselves with workers, and workers would defend the company at all costs and say things that would shed the company or put the company in a better light, no matter what the situation was. But once we started cracking that and saying, hey, there are some issues here, and these are what the issues are, and actually identifying them and not being afraid to voice our opinions and concerns about the company, that started to fracture really, really quickly. And another mistake that they made was the simple fact that they changed our pay scale. They thought that we would be quiet and silent because they were also powerful in these Facebook groups and they could control the narrative. They don't control the entire narrative of social media. And that's where I think we were able to infiltrate a lot of the conversations, was in having the anger, the desire to break that up. And so the more that they pushed back on us and tried to gain control, the more vigorous that we got in our responses. And so I think that, like, as far as comparing that to other apps do have the people that try to defend the companies, but not as much as Ship did. So it was definitely a huge obstacle, one that I think is still there. We've overcome it by so many different ways and made some leaps and bounds in our progress. But the company still tries to basically negate us by hiring new people and basically indoctrinating them with the same mentality of Ship is perfect. It's just a matter of educating workers and educating each other and having conversations. 99% of the people that I've talked to, and I can say that very confidently, 99% of the people that I've talked to on these trips with Human Rights Watch will tell you that while they may not agree with everything, the one thing that they do agree with is the fact that these companies are definitely trying with all their might to silence workers and treat us like employees, but pay us as independent contractors. They're trying to misclassify us and make money off of our backs. And so I think that's a common denominator between all the apps that we just need to focus on and understand that at the end of the day, it's about profit for the gig companies and that they don't care about us as people.
Thanks for clarifying that, Willie, and that's true. And I think it's been really exciting watching you and the other ship shoppers chip away at that cult-like mentality. You've done some amazing work. I wanted to, another question, unfortunately, I don't think we'll have time to get to all the audience questions, but this one's really exciting. I wanted to give everyone a chance to answer. What is a vision of a just and fair workplace look like in your context? I know we're all, everyone on this panel is a gig worker, at least as far as we're concerned, but working in different industries. I'd love to hear what that vision looks like for you. What would a just and fair workplace feel like, be like? What would it be like to work there? I wonder if, Honan, maybe you could start us off.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Can you share your vision for what a just and fair workplace in your context looks like?
¿Puedes compartir, Jonan, cómo sería la visión de un lugar justo donde tú pudieras trabajar con estas aplicaciones?
Sí. Nosotros estamos trabajando en la calle, entonces pues cambiar la calle es un poco difícil, pero no es imposible. Y gracias a este movimiento y a esta organización hemos tenido la oportunidad de tener juntas con grandes mandos de la policía y esperamos que el día de mañana...
Déjame traducir.
Sí.
So he said that, work in the street is very difficult, and it's so difficult to change because, they are facing, a lot of crime, but now they are, meetings with, trying to get, have meetings with the police, with the head of the police, to see how they can, figure it out a way to be safe.
Y, y espera, ese es no es un sueño muy lejano y esperamos que las calles se compongan muy pronto y que las legislaciones las aprueben también muy pronto para que esto cambie para bien de muchos de nosotros.
So he hopes by soon they can be working like safe, and they don't can feel afraid to be in the street. And also he expects that the sixth legislation that they proposed just a few months ago go through, because it's going to change their lives. So, and I can mention a little bit the six legislation that they are working with. So, and like in the past month, the deliveristas, they introduced six legislations. So one is access to bathrooms. Another one is the distance. The distance between the deliveries, that the order that they had to deliver is long. So sometimes they had to buy like 4 or 5 miles. So, and they are doing it on bikes. So we are proposing that the legislation that this is going to control, so that the delivery workers, they don't going to get punishment in case if they deny the orders, if they don't want to take the order. The other is like like I said, access to bathroom. The other is like the apps are charging the workers a fee when they get paid. So we want to take out that this fee, because it's not fair. The workers, at every I think it's every hour. So if they get paid, they want to get this payment. So they had to pay like $2 extra to get the pay. So the other is that they are not getting any back from for delivery the food. For example, they had to buy everything. Even in the pandemic, they had to buy mask, hand sanitizer, everything, because the company didn't provide anything. So we introduced we introduced a legislation that, we want the apps give them at least, the equipment to this work, to do this work. And the other one is about the minimum pay. So the workers need a minimum pay, because actually sometimes they just make $3 an hour if they don't get the orders. So just like to make sure you guys know that this is the six laws that the deliveristas are working with.
Thank you. I'm so glad you all are pushing through that legislation. That sounds really exciting. We're almost out of time, but I wonder if Jeanette, Willie, Kat, Adrian, if you could chime in maybe just for a minute, what a just
Yes, hurry.
workplace.
Hurry. My computer's about to die. I'm trying to like yell at my charger. Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and my computer dies. I'm really sorry. But there's a couple things that I think would make it better. One is, if you're a billionaire and you are using tax dollar money to subsidize as corporate welfare to pay your employees with food stamps and welfare, shame on you. You need to pay your workers more. So I think that needs to be a note. Also, follow the laws. So if there's safety laws, right here. Oh my God, my computer's about to die. Also, if there's laws in the books. So if OSHA says it's triple digits outside, let your drivers stop long enough to cool their vans down. If OSHA says, like, once again, pregnant women can't lift a certain amount, let them stop lifting things. There are laws in the books for a reason. And we have this two-tiered legal system that says the CEO class can follow whatever laws they want, and everybody else has to follow everything else. Damn it. Did I cuss on camera? We just, that's the biggest thing is, like, there are laws already on the books to protect workers, and we are not forcing the CEO class to follow the law. And I don't know what's wrong with our legislators right now, but they are too chicken shit to enforce them. So for instance, like Elon Musk just made his workers go back a week early, even though everybody else was shut down. Why wasn't he arrested? Anybody else would have been arrested if they broke those laws, but he wasn't. So until we start enforcing laws on rich folks the same way we enforce laws on people like us, we're not going to have workplaces that are safe, that are equitable. And that, I think, would be the biggest way that we can make workplaces be safe and fair, and people get paid well. And it's really not that hard because the laws are already there.
For sure.
I have a 2-word answer. My 2-word answer is, well, I guess 3 words: worker-owned co-ops. I'm done working for a boss. I want to work for my coworkers, period. And so worker-run co-ops, getting the funding to start these sort of organizations on our own, and take over the market, because we're the ones who know how to run it anyway. So that's my short answer.
All right. Jeanette, Willie?
Equitable pay, minimum pay, safe spaces for people to perform and actually be their best. And money from Spotify and Apple Music, equitable pay on those bases as well, because we're not even getting a stick. So yes.
I would add that just treat us like human beings. Stop hiding behind computers and sending us blank, emails that are basically canned answers. We can see right through that, and we know that you don't see us as humans. So an equitable situation where we're seen as humans. We don't have to search for bathrooms. We don't have to consider our tips as part of our base pay, and subsidize how we make our living through tips, and making us feel basically gaslighting us and making us feel like crap when they don't come through, because that's what happens. We feel like we did something wrong. So that would be my answer: is treat us like human beings.
Thanks, Willie. Well, we're just about done. I want to thank all our panelists. I want to thank Glendy in particular for stepping in to help us ensure that Honan can be part of this important conversation. We want to give you just a second to plug anything anyone could do right now in the audience to support your work. We could do like a lightning round, 30 seconds each. We're also going to be sending out an email after this with some links and stuff for folks to take action, but here's your opportunity for a plug.
Feel free to say it aloud, but also drop it in the chat if you guys have a link or a handle or a petition or a GoFundMe or whatever you guys have in there that would elevate your organizing. We want people to be able to see.
I'll start off.
Okay, sorry
about that. We're really bad about asking for donations at Gig Workers Collective. So I would start there. Go to gigworkerscollective.org and donate if possible. If not, if you're a gig worker and want to connect with us, please go to coworker.org and sign up there, as well as Gig Workers Collective. Sign up there as well. And we would love to be in contact with you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And I think Vanessa had just 1 or 2 notes to close us out.
Yes. So a couple of things are, if there's a way for people to get involved in your organizing, make sure that you leave whatever sort of links or things like that are appropriate. Also, if there's any way that people from the audience or fellow workers maybe outside of your industry can elevate and uplift your organizing, again, feel free to shout it out or drop it in the chat. And then I also just wanted to really quickly plug a strike that's happening on the 21st. Rideshare Drivers United has called for a strike in support of the PRO Act and against Prop 22 in California. If you're an app-based worker, please join us. Gig Workers Collective membership here is going to be joining in solidarity. It could be turning off your app and not working that day. It could be coming out to a rally in San Diego, LA, or San Francisco. And whatever you guys can do, please support the PRO Act. And please support any collective worker actions like a picket line or a demonstration or a protest. Even if we're not, part of official labor unions, our collective actions are just as important. They are oftentimes even harder to pull off because workers don't have any protections in our workplaces, and we don't have strike funds, and we can't, we can't absorb those costs very well. So when we're saying shut the shit down, it's coming, at our expense, and it's symbolically very important to make sure that you recognize and respect those actions as well. So I think that was everything that I had to say. Drew, if there's anything that I missed, please feel free to hop in. But I also just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of the panelists, all of the attendees. We worked for a long time to pull this panel off, and it feels so rewarding now that it's happened and materialized, just to hear everybody contribute to these conversations and see how much our struggles intersect, overlap, and are interconnected. And just don't ever forget that the next person that's a worker next to you is also similarly positioned, and that's your comrade and that's your ally and not your competition, because bosses love to divide us, but we're all stronger together. And I just want to leave it at that. Thank you guys for attending. Love and solidarity.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.